Hi, I'm Roxanne Richardson, and this is the Casual Friday podcast. In this week's podcast, I'll tell you about my trip to Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival. I'll give you a progress update on my hand-spun, hand-dyed cardigan project, and I'll share with you some of the sewing projects I've been working on recently. So let's get started. Last weekend, I flew out to Washington, D.C. My friend Melissa picked me up. She is a member of the Minnesota Knitters Guild. That's how I met her. She's actually on the board. She doesn't have a local guild, and she has friends who live here who also knit, and so that's how she found out about our guild. So when I was talking earlier this year about wanting to go to one of the big festivals, either Maryland or Rhinebeck, she said, "Oh, come to Maryland and stay with me, and then we'll go together." And she goes there every year because that's her local festival. It's about an hour drive from where she lives. So I flew out. I flew out on Friday. We just sat around and knit and watched TV on Friday and ate dinner and just had a great time. And then on Saturday we went to World Embassy Day. We planned to see if we could hit 10 embassies out of the 60 that were participating. So it's the one day a year you can go, just the public is welcome to come into the embassy and kind of see what they have. And they offer cultural activities. A lot of times there's singing or dancing or, just music, live music and food. So sometimes it's little bits of food and sometimes it's more substantial. And it really varies from embassy to embassy, kind of what they decide to share with you. So we did that Saturday, got back home about 3 o'clock. Again, ate, knit, watched TV, talked. It was really great. And then on Sunday, we went to the festival. That was the day that Melissa usually goes because the first day, Saturday, is the busiest day. It can be just packed with people. The weekend was forecast to be rainy on both days, but still, because the festival tends to be busier on Saturday, we were going on Sunday, and the embassy day was Saturday. I'm used to our local festival, Shepherd's Harvest, which is actually this weekend, May 11th and 12th. It's always Mother's Day weekend. And I have watched our local festival grow over the past, 15 or so years, from having vendors and all the demonstrations in one barn to having demonstrations in their own barn, and then 4 or 5 barns of vendors, and then also the animals and all kinds of things there. So that's really grown over the years. I think our festival this year is going to have about 150 vendors. And Maryland Sheep and Wool, I think they say, I didn't count them up, but they said there's like 250 vendors. The vendors are spread out in very different ways. So it was busy. There were a lot of people there, but I never felt super crowded and like shoulder to shoulder. But Melissa said she has been there when it has been that way. So part of it was Sunday, and part of it was probably that it was a bit rainy, but it's not even bad rain. It was just kind of like misty, and there were a couple of times where it was like actually dripping down. You might need an umbrella or something, but it wasn't even really, as a Minnesotan, what I would call rain. It was just mist. When we got there, we wanted to see the animals first, and that's the thing that really struck me as being really quite different from Shepherd's Harvest. We have animals in our festival. There is a barn, I think just one barn, that has animals, different kinds of animals. People will have like alpaca or different kinds of sheep or cashmere goats. They have a few farms, and some of them will sell if they have their yarn milled, or they might be selling some of their fleece or something. So some of those will be in there. And there are times when they do sheepdog demonstrations. So they'll have a flock of sheep and they'll demonstrate how the dog can herd them around. So that's always fun if it's not raining on our weekend for our festival. But I was amazed at how many barns they had that were just sheep after sheep after sheep, all these family farms, and some of them came from the Midwest. Well, I saw one that had come from Oregon. So some of them come there to sell like rams or ewes, and there were just so many different breeds, but a whole lot of the same breed, like from one farm to another. Like they would have all the Coopsworth together, all of the Jacob together, or whatever. And so that was just so fun to see all of those different sheep in the animals in the barn. And my understanding is that that's originally what it started as a gathering for shepherds, so that they could, you know, meet and buy and sell animals to each other. I could be wrong, but my understanding is that's really where it started from, is from the shepherd standpoint. So they had a few different demonstrations that were going on.
This is natural, okay? All you mothers that dreamed of quads, this is your sheep right here. This is not, all 4 of these lambs are her babies. Finn sheep, or Finnish land race, as they are known in their native country of Finland, are considered to be several hundred years old, descending from the mouflon that live in the wild on Sardinia and Corsica, and also said to be related to other Scandinavian short-tailed sheep. First imported to the United States in 1968, the primary use of Finn sheep was the production of crossbred ewes. Finn ewes are hardy, will lamb on an accelerated lambing program. That means they would have 3 lamb crops within a 2-year time period. They have strong maternal instincts and are highly prolific. The Finn sheep's lambs are noted for their high vigor and livability. For these reasons, they have been used to develop the polypaid and easy-care breeds known for their maternal abilities. Over the last 30 years or so, more research work and data has been compiled in the United States involving the Finn sheep and their crosses than any other breed of sheep.
The vendors were in a couple of different types of setups. There was a main exhibition hall, which is a very big, brightly lit exhibition hall. And so there were vendors in there. And then there was an annex to the main exhibition hall where demonstrations were going on. So they had a sheep to shawl contest going on that started at 10 o'clock. And so I think there were 5 teams, and I think there's 4 people on each team. And so if you're not familiar with these, each team has a sheep assigned to them. They have a loom that they have warped up, and they have a plan for what they're going to weave. And the contest started at 10 o'clock, and their sheep would get sheared, and then they bring it, and they'd probably have to skirt it quickly, and they'd bring it into the exhibition hall, and then they would have, everybody would start, you know, like carding the wool, and it's not scoured, so they're carding fleece in the grease. And so they're carding it. By the time they get enough row lags, the rolls that they can spin, then somebody starts spinning. And so they're carding and carding and carding, and then I think they would have a couple of people spinning then. So as the jobs, you know, stop being necessary, then people are shifting. And then once there's enough yarn spun, then the weaver can start weaving. So I wanted to watch that. I was watching it as the fleeces were coming in and as people were starting to spin, and then we came back later. So they had a time limit. They had to be done at 1 o'clock. So we came shortly after 1 o'clock to see all of the shawls that were completed. They were sitting on a table, and then they were going to be judged and then auctioned off at like 3 o'clock. So we didn't stay for that. That's always a fun thing for me to see. And the teams tend to dress up. They have a theme. There was one team of really young women. I would say they were all in their 20s, and they were called the Pink Ladies. So they all had t-shirts or jackets or something, and there was another team where they had different kind of costumey hats and stuff on. So that's really fun to see how each team presents themselves, and to see that what the shawl outcome is, because they planned it ahead of time with warp of different colors, and they have to really keep track of what they're doing. they mentioned that there was a reporter from the Washington Post who was there, who was taking pictures and interviewing the people participating. So I don't know if anyone gets a Washington Post, and if you happen to see that in there sometime this weekend or this past weekend. I had gotten a comment from somebody in the Central Maryland Knitters Guild who said, oh, stop by our table and say hello. And I wasn't sure where they were going to be. There was nothing in the program. I thought maybe they would be in this demo barn, since that's how it works at Shepherd's Harvest. It's the Knitters Guild is in the demo barn. And so I did find them, and I got to meet several lovely people and got to chat with them for a while, and introduced my friend Melissa to them because she hadn't been aware of them. So she was excited to find out more about a guild that was more local to her as well. So we finally went to the vendor barns, and we started with the main exhibition hall, and that's where my impression of this festival was like, oh my God, this is so different. Because it's this huge, really well lit building, and the booths were enormous, and it reminded me of being at like a convention, like at a corporate convention for something, with these huge booths, and they were just so fancy. And so we kind of walked through, and I wanted to make sure I didn't get sucked into just buying something that I saw right away. My goal when I went there was that I wasn't going to buy any fleece or roving to spin with. What I was going to do was buy breed-specific yarn, because that's these festivals sometimes that's a place where you can do that. And Melissa had experience with that, and she's done that every year because she's not a spinner. So I had in my head I wanted to get some yarn from Fin Sheep, and we found a booth that sold that really quickly. But I didn't want to commit to that right away, because it was literally like the third booth we came across. So we went through this exhibition hall, and we just kind of like trying to get my footing. And then we went to the next vendor barn, and I went, oh, this is what I'm more familiar with. So it's like smaller booths, and it's just like you'd see at almost any, if you've been to any festival, those kind of booths, and people selling all kinds of things like yarn, you know, hand-dyed yarn. It could be roving, it could be, some people were selling raw fleece, you know, the things that I'm used to, and not as well lit. So I'm like, okay, that's the big spenders were in the main exhibition hall, and then we had these other ones. My friend was looking for some Jacob yarn. So she had some things that she was looking for. She loves Jacob, and she's going to knit it for herself. And she knits with fingering weight yarn for sweaters, because she, unlike me in the Midwest, where I need worsted weight sweaters, she likes a fingering weight sweater. So she bought yarn at a couple different places, but she was in this booth buying some Jacob yarn, and then I see they had roving. And that's what I ended up buying, because I loved the way it felt. And I thought, I do know I can spin enough wool for a sweater. And so, oh, let me show you what I got, because it's put away in the closet. So if you're not familiar with Jacob sheep, these are some of the oldest breeds that are known. And they have usually 4, but apparently they can have up to 6 horns. So usually they have 2 that curl down, and then 2 that come up like this, and they're smaller sheep. And they have different colors on them. They have black and white and gray, and so a lot of times they'll separate the colors out. So they had roving that was like this, so it was just like blended together. And from the last sweater that I spun with a gray, I just love how this kind of wool dyes up. So you get that kind of depth of color because of the variation in this. Like, because when this spins, it's going to be more homogeneous, but not completely. It'll be more tonal. So I got 3 of these. I think these are each 4 ounces. And then I got one that was just the black. It's really dark brown, but I thought that might be interesting to do something with that. I don't know what, but so I got 12 ounces of this roving, and then 4 ounces of this. This might, I don't know. We'll see. So that wasn't what I planned on, but it's the amount that would fit in my suitcase. So I didn't buy anything else except this t-shirt. They have a different t-shirt every year. And so I got this, and in the summertime, since I can't wear sweaters, I often wear knitting or sheep related t-shirts instead. In addition to the vendor barns, there were these completely enclosed tents like that vendors could be in, and those that were spread out all over the grounds. I didn't go into any of those. We didn't really see, we were there for 4 hours. Oh, there's one other thing that I did. When we went through the main exhibition hall, I came around a corner and I saw Handspun mini spinners. They're e-spinners, electric spinners. And I have been interested in those, but like any spinning wheel, it's something that you need to try. When I bought my treadle wheel, I went to a dealer who had like so many different types. And I had 4 that I wanted to try, that I thought that I would like, and that I heard were good for good all-around wheels, especially for kind of beginners. And I knew that I hated the one that I was renting while I was taking lessons. I hated that one. And so I'd done some research about others. The first one she sat down in front of me that I really thought I was going to like, I was like, oh, repulsed by it. I'm like, I hate this. She goes, oh, I can adjust them. No, get it away from me. And then the other 3 I really liked. I would have been happy with any of them. And then it was kind of a matter of aesthetically, what did I like, and the price point and what all I got with it. And so that's how I ended up with a Lendrum double treadle, and I got this whole package with it. And I've been very happy with it. But I have been interested in understanding more about, what is it called? Double tension, it's like, it isn't Scotch tension, it isn't Irish tension, it's like this double, so there's 2 tension bands, and I can't even remember what it's called. And I've also been interested in e-spinners just to understand what they're like and what they'd be good for, and whether or not it would be something I'd be interested in. So I came across the Handspun mini spinner booth, and it was one of the brands that I thought, I've heard these are good. So I sat down, can I try this? Sure. And I sat down and it was like, oh my God, this is just so easy. And I was doing what's called short forward draw. That's a worsted spun method of spinning instead of woolen spun, which I use the long draw. And that's what I spun my hand spun for the sweater I'm knitting. I consider short forward draw to be it just takes longer. And like not thinking I would ever have the patience to do that, a sweater's quantity worth, or it's just, I really have fallen in love with long draw as a spinning method, even though in my knitting life, I mostly use worsted spun yarn. But it was so easy. I'm like, this just, and I wasn't having to look at what I was doing. I was, and I thought, that's amazing. He kind of told me the pricing on it, and I was like, that is a lot more than I thought it would be or that I'd want to spend. But I really liked it. And so later on, I kind of wanted to go back and try it again, because he had 2 models. He had the Pro, which is the one that I had tried, and then he had the classic one, which is, significantly cheaper. And I talked to him about the kinds of things, the kind of yarn I spin. I'm not doing art yarn. I'm not doing bulky yarn. And he's like, if you're doing worsted weight and thinner, this would be fine for you. And so, but he doesn't bring the classic ones to the shows because people want to buy the Pros, but you can get one within a couple of days if you do online ordering, which is a good thing because I almost came back with a e-spinner. And I didn't want to buy something like that so impulsively. So Melissa said, why don't you try some other e-spinners? They have some here in the demonstration hall. And this is the problem with me. I hadn't noticed because everything was so overwhelming. So there was one that was a nano. It's like a 3D printed one, and they're the really low end of the price point. I did not like it. I was like, oh, it just felt so flimsy. I tried a couple of them, and I just like the comparison between using the mini spinner Pro and then using that nano was like, it was so different. And of course the price is wildly different as well. So there was one other booth, it was Daedalus, and they were kind of busy, and it didn't seem like you could actually go sit in their booth. Maybe you could stand there and try it, but they were kind of busy. And it's another 3D printed one, but it's a higher end 3D printed one, and there's so many choices. They have different models, and I'm like, oh. And I knew my friend had just recently bought one, so I thought, well, if I wanted to try a Daedalus, I could probably try out hers and see what it was like. So it's something I'm thinking about, and I hadn't really thought about trying those at this show. It wasn't on my mind, even though that's something that I have been wanting to try. So that was really great. So I had a wonderful date, a wonderful weekend. Got to spend some quality time with a friend, and came home with some wool to spin. So all in all, it was fantastic. So I have finished the body of my hand-spun sweater. It's got the hand-dyed gradient stripes in it. And so now I need to do the sleeves and the bands. The gradient starts out with the darkest color at the very top and goes into the lightest color and then shifts back to the darkest and back to the lightest and back to the darkest. So I have one stripe of the darkest at the top. When I get to the lightest, I do the lightest, and then I do the lightest again, and then to the darkest, so I've got 2 darks in a row, 2 lights in a row. But I started and ended with 1 dark. That's just for the length, and that's how everything worked out. And then at the bottom of the ribbing, I've edged it with the darkest color as well. So I need to do the sleeves next. I wasn't really sure how much of the yarn I had used up. When I was spinning it, I kept being in a panic that I wasn't going to have enough, and I kept going back and buying more braids from the shepherd. And I still have 1 braid left that's in reserve because I thought, well, I probably am going to have enough. So I weighed like the total weight of this body, and I know that this is 2/3 of the entire sweater. I know that the sleeves and then the bands are going to be another 1/3 of the total because I've done a spreadsheet to figure it out. And I've used about 7.5 ounces. So I'm probably going to use like 11 ounces total of wool, and I spun slightly more than 20, and I have 2 more ounces of braid left. So I actually have a second sweater's quantity of yarn. The trick will be with the gradients, the dyed bits, how I would use those, if I would use those in a second sweater. I was also checking on how much of the colored yarn I have left, because I kind of calculated the number of stitches I was going to need for each, and kind of calculated the total it was going to be. And so I ended up dyeing 15 grams of wool for each of the colors, except the darkest one. I had dyed all that ahead of time and dyed a lot more of it. I'm going to have enough of all of the wools to do 1 sleeve. I don't know how much I'll have to do a second sleeve, but since I have tons of yarn left, and I'll have a better idea of how much more I'll need, and I have the dye solution. So it'll be okay if it's not quite exactly the same on the second sleeve, because it's just they're going to be separated from each other, and it's not going to be as obvious. I know how much I need to dye, how much dye I need to get these different colors. So that's where I am right now. I think what I'm going to do is knit 1 sleeve, see where I am with the dyed quantity and what I need to do. But I think what I will do in between, so I don't have to do 2 sleeves in a row, because that's always a little boring, is after I do the first sleeve, then I'm going to figure out exactly what to do with the neck bands and the button bands. I'm going to do a couple of experiments. One of the things that I want to do with this sweater is when I pick up for the bands, I want to use what's called a double pickup. It's kind of a double knitting almost in a way at the pickup. So it creates this really nice little band. I'll insert a picture from Big Book of Knitting that has what I'm planning to do. What I'm not sure is what I want to do with the neck. One idea would just be to do a regular ribbed neckband. But another thing I'm thinking of is doing a collar that just comes up and flips over. The order in which I do the neckband versus the button bands is different depending on which of those choices I make. So with this particular collar I'm looking at, you do the 2 button bands, and then you pick up from the center of the button band all the way around the neck to the center of the buttonhole band. And that way, when it's overlapped, the 2 edges of the collar, if it's, you know, if it's something that's long and it's flipping over, then they're not overlapping each other. So you do the neck after you do the button bands. Normally for a plain band, you do the neckband first and then you pick up all the way up. You can do it the opposite, but it's just not done very often because the very top button hole needs to be in one of those bands, either the neck band or the button band, and it's just easier if you can do it, I think. It's just more common to do them all up the button band or buttonhole band. So those are the things that I'm going to be playing with. And what I'll do is I'll just pick up on the edge. Oh, the other thing that I'm thinking of is when I pick up with this double band thing, it's like, it looks like smooth stockinette and then it transitions into the ribbing. Do I pick up with the dark color, the darkest color, switch to the gray for the ribbing and then edge with the dark like that? Or do I do the double pickup with the gray and only have the edging in the dark color? So, you know, what I'm picturing is it might be nicer to have those 2 parallel bands of the dark like I have here at the bottom, but I don't know what it's actually going to look like. So, I'll pick up on each side, do a little strip of each idea, and I'll do some stuff up here at the top and experiment with how I think I want those to look, and then I'll be able to pick what I want to do. So it might be I'm doing all the experiments, and then I do the second sleeve, and then I do the final thing after I live with my experiments for a while. Not totally sure. Let me know if you guys have thoughts on that, what you think might look good, whether you think the double stripes coming up here would be a good idea, or just the edging, because I do know I'm going to have the last couple of rows in the bind off are going to be in the dark color on all of them. It's just, what do I have at that transition between the body and the ribbing? What am I going to do there? I talked about how one of my goals for this year was to go to one of the big sheep and wool festivals, and I've done that. One of my other goals was to really get back into sewing. It's something I've been wanting to do for a couple of years. I kind of dipped my toe in 2 or 3 years ago. Then I ended up buying myself a new sewing machine, and then I didn't do anything with it. And so this year I've been taking some sewing classes. They're called Continuing On at this fabric store in St. Paul called Treadle Yard Goods. It's the store where I usually go to get buttons for my sweaters, because they have vintage buttons there that somebody from the Button Society brings in and sells on consignment there. And actually, I think I found the buttons that I'm going to have for my sweater. I just need to remember remember to bring the sweater in next time I go, just to make sure that's what I want. So I've been taking a couple of these 5-week sessions, and what it is you just bring in your project and you get help as you need it. So in the first 5-week session, I was working on this skirt, a wool skirt with hand woven wool fabric from the border counties of the UK, like Scotland, England, border counties. And it was from a vintage sweater kit. And I knit the sweater, and I was just intimidated by the skirt because it was so narrow and it was plaid, and there were so many things. I wanted it to turn out well. I wanted it to fit me. I wanted it to be lined, and I wanted a little hand holding. So because I'm happy to learn on my own, and this just got me, I couldn't do this. I was too afraid. And so it was so great to be able to just talk this over to somebody who's like the sewing equivalent of me. Like she just has a lot of experience, and she has like options, like you could do this or you could do that, or here's an easier way to do it, or here's something you could think about. And so I had my hand held through that. I was mostly sewing only during the class because I had self-drafted the skirt pattern. I really didn't know where I was going. So each step of the way she would help me. And then finally at the end, I was doing things on my own at home. And then I signed up for another session, and I had a shirt dress I wanted to do, and had a lot of, you know, interesting components to it. And it was a challenge, but I was able to do things at home, but get help when I needed it. And then I signed up for a third session, and I've just been sewing up a storm. And a lot of the things I'm sewing are kind of easy, and it's still like things I've never done before, and it's interesting, but it's so fast. Like compared to spinning your own yarn and dyeing your own yarn and then knitting every stitch of it after you design the sweater, sewing is so fast. The fabric's already made. You just have to cut it out and put it together. So that's so great. And so I've been sewing on my own. I've been doing things that I know I need for summer. I wanted a couple of summer tops because, you know, in the summer I'm usually wearing a linen dress, or I'm wearing a t-shirt that has something to do with knitting on it. So I'm not, and it's all just like, I don't want to have to think about it. You know, I have like a couple of pair of pants, you know, like capris, that I can wear if I'm biking or whatever, that I wear with my t-shirts. And then I have these linen dresses that hang from my shoulders. And there's like no thought that goes into it. It's like, I really don't care. But I was like, I want some cute things, because every once in a while we're meeting people, we're going somewhere, and I'm like, what am I going to wear? I've sewn some things that are just like loungewears, pajama type of things, and then I've made a couple of other things. So I think I showed you a month or so ago a blouse that I made that I loved the fabric and I loved the pattern, but somehow the two together made me think I was dressed like a dental hygienist. But I made that was kind of a practice one, because that was a fabric I got at like a discount fabric warehouse type place. And I bought some really nice fabric at the fabric store where I take my classes. And so I kind of really wanted to know what I was doing. And this blouse has a lot of different versions. I'll hold it up, and I'll show you some footage of me modeling it so you can see what it looks like on. So it's called the Rhapsody Blouse by Love Notions. Let me see, can you see? This fabric, it's called a cotton lawn, and it's got like these stripes in it. It's white on white stripes, and then it's got this kind of embroidery on the fabric. So it's really fine. It has a yoke in there. And normally you would use the same fabric for the yoke on the inside, but because this hat is so transparent and it has the striping pattern, I just use bleached muslin for the inside. These are flutter sleeves. The pattern comes with regular short sleeves, bishop sleeves. I don't know if you could do sleeveless or not. There's like a bunch of different options for what you can do. And then this little V-neck, you have this bias binding, and you can have these ties hanging down, or you can leave them off. They have so many different options for this. So one of the things that I'm learning is that with woven fabrics, even though my measurements for the first time in my life all are in one size, on the pattern piece, like the bust, waist, hips are all one size, Love Notions tells you to pick your size based on your high bust, which is up around here. And I know that my shoulders are a little broader, and they want you to do that so that you get the right frame size for you, so that the shoulders are going to fit you. And then you can do a bust adjustment. Like if you are small busted, you could do a small bust adjustment. If you're really busty, you could do a full bust adjustment. And the Love Notions patterns, a lot of them have two different fronts. They have the standard bust front, and then they have the full bust front, so that you wouldn't have to do that adjustment yourself. You just naturally use that other pattern piece. But because my high bust and full bust are the same, and I'm not flat chested, that's because my shoulders are a little broader. So I have learned to blend from a bigger size to the smaller size. So a couple inches below the underarm, then I start blending into the waist. And then the bottom part is that smaller size as well. So this has been interesting to experiment with this, with woven fabrics and see how that works. And I've been kind of thinking about, I wonder if I should, knitting stretches so I don't, worry about these things, but I wonder if, making some adjustments to my knitting might be helpful just based on what I'm learning with my sewing. So, so that's the first thing that I made. The next thing I made is I have a winter bathrobe that goes to my ankles. It's made of polar fleece. The two fronts completely cross over, so that's a double layer. It's very warm and I love it in the winter. But, this time of year, I still want something, but I don't want that fleece bathrobe. So I wanted to make a bathrobe. So again, I did a Love Notions pattern. This one is called the Compose Robe. And it's really, the construction is very easy. I think all of the seams were serged, except for there's patch pockets that are top stitched. And so this is a knit fabric that I'm using. You can use a woven. And this was something I was wanting to learn more about how to work with, because a lot of times you need to stretch stretchy stitches, or you use a serger to get that stretch at the seams. And I was concerned about doing top stitching on a knit, but it's not a seam where there's really going to be pulling. But also I'm learning about different fabrics. So this is called a French terry. So it's thicker. It's like if you're making a sweatshirt and it's got that nice fuzzy stuff on the inside, but it's knit on the outside. That's what this is. But it's a print, and this is what it looks like. It looks like knitting. So I had to get that. And what I've learned about French terry is that you can do your straight stitching because it's a thinner or a thicker knit fabric. You can do the straight stitching on the pockets. So I'm wearing this every day. I love this. And you can tell where I was working on it in my class versus at home, because the dark serging is what they had on the serger in my class, and then the white is what I had at home, but nobody's going to see the insides. So I've got one white seam up the back, and the front placket is attached with white, but all the inside stuff is dark. So, and it's got a nice hook on it. So it was very simple. I'm going to make another one of these. I bought some rayon challis. So I'm learning all these fabrics. So that's an even lighter weight one. And that's one where I could pack in a suitcase and it wouldn't take up very much room. Like I wouldn't ever pack this because even though it's lighter weight, it's just too much. And then I made a couple of pair of pajamas. Again, very easy, but also they're like camisole tops and then capri bottoms. And it's another Love Notions pattern, and it's got a bunch of options or a couple of options for the bottoms. So the bottoms can be in woven or knit. They can be shorts or they can be capris. And then you have the cami top, and again, they have a standard bust and a full bust, so you don't have to do a bust adjustment. So I had some fabric that I bought a couple of years ago when I was trying to get back into sewing. And I think this is probably a quilting fabric, but I wore these last night and it's just fine. But I just love the fabric. It's like these little red birds on black fabric. Then I had some red t-shirt material that I had bought. One of the things that's kind of aggravating me about knits is using a twin needle to get the hems. So if you look at anything that you have that's knitted, or not knitted, that's sewn with knit fabric, if you look at the hems, you'll see these two parallel rows of stitches. You can do that on a standard sewing machine if you use what's called a twin needle. So you have two spools of thread and you're threading them through your machine, and then you thread through each needle, and then the bobbin is connecting the two of them on the bottom. The problem is that it's not very stretchy most of the time, and another problem is that you can get what's called tunneling, so it looks like a little hump in between them, and trying to adjust the tension to get it to work is kind of a pain in the rear. And I'm already thinking about, do I want a cover stitch machine so I can have a machine that does those hems beautifully and is stretchy. So I'm thinking about that. very strongly. That was one pair of pajamas, woven bottoms and a knitted top. And then the other set is a knit print. It's a cotton jersey print. So it's like t-shirt material. It's got squirrels and bunnies and foxes on it. So this is very comfy. But again, you know, the tunneling in the hems, driving me crazy, and having to switch the twin needle and the single needle and rethread, you know, constantly is also a pain in the rear. So that is what I've been working on lately. I've got 3 other projects in the queue. I've got another robe, I have another knit top, and I have a pair of pants that I've done a muslin for, but I don't have fabric for yet. So pants can be tricky, and so I did a muslin for my class just to see if I was going to have to adjust the fit or not, and they actually fit me great. It's called the Pietra pants. It's from Closet Core, and they're very high-waisted. And this is another thing where I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm standard with length measurements, because I have several pairs of high-waisted jeans and none of them come up to my actual waist. So they're, you know, usually a little bit short of that. But I don't know that my torso is that much longer. I think I might be shorter from shoulder to waist and then longer from waist to my crotch, maybe. But these pants, a lot of people say that they come up too high and they have to make an adjustment. And for me, they're going to be perfect. That's going to be really fun. So that'll be coming up soon, I hope. Well, that's it for this week's Casual Friday. If you have any comments or questions about today's video or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.